in order to save the world, sealed herself in ice for 100 years because she was carrying the child of the legendary hero, King Kyle, who had once defeated the Demon King. However, fearing that the Demon King might one day return, they decided to preserve the hero's child as a countermeasure for when King Kyle passed away. Not long after, that boy grew up. His name was Kaisel, a trainee knight filled with passion and determination to protect everyone. To achieve that, he needed strength. He trained every day with Claus, a fully fledged knight. Although Kaisel always lost, Claus constantly gave him valuable advice in combat. After training, the two would patrol the city together to check if anything unusual happened. It was usually quite boring, so Claus would often complain. Just then, a dark elf passed by them. The appearance of a dark elf in the city was quite uncommon. Besides Kaisel and Claus, the townspeople also looked at him suspiciously. As the three passed each other, the citizens, worried that the elf might bring misfortune upon them, demanded that Kaisel and Claus deal with him at once. However, since he had done nothing wrong, they had no reason to act. Seeing that the townspeople were becoming agitated, Claus quickly calmed the situation. He then split off from Kaisel to patrol on his own, while Kaisel, during his patrol, encountered Frey, a priestess who was also his friend. The two sat down together reminiscing about old times when they and Claus were still in the orphanage, catching bugs until sunset and getting scolded by the priests. Frey recalled that while she and Claus were crying in fear, Kaisel was able to fall asleep right there out of exhaustion, something that astonished Claus for his nerves of steel. Frey encouraged Kaisel, who still felt insecure about only being a trainee knight. She believed he would soon complete his apprenticeship. However, Kaisel confided in her about a recent incident in town that he couldn't prevent the Dark Elf. Meanwhile, inside the royal castle, the king received alarming news that demons had appeared in the royal forest. The report greatly worried him, and he immediately ordered a scouting party to investigate, fearing that the tragedy from 100 years ago might happen again. Around the same time, a man named Lord Moraham brought someone with him to the castle, the very same dark elf who had appeared in the town earlier. His presence inside the castle caused astonishment and suspicion, but Lord Moraham vouched for him. Later, in an emergency meeting, the king's advisors argued fiercely about the scale of the scouting force to be dispatched. Some insisted on a large army to ensure safety, while others feared unnecessary casualties. At that moment, Lord Moraham entered with the Dark Elf and introduced him as Rahit, leader of Black Edge, a renowned band of skilled mercenaries. Moraham proposed using Black Edge for the scouting mission, praising Rahit's strength as being capable of defeating 100 men alone. However, the proposal was immediately met with fierce opposition from other officials who harbored deep hatred toward Dark Elves and refused to entrust them with such an important task. Moraham cleverly countered their arguments, mocking those who only cared for their own political and financial interests. Faced with strong opposition, Moraham appeared to yield and apologized for his sudden suggestion, but in truth, his intentions had already taken root. Later, at a tavern, Claus informed Kaisel that he, along with Gran and Flegg, would be joining the scouting team headed to the royal forest. He told Kaisel to keep training diligently while he was away. Kaisel felt sad and anxious, but Claus encouraged him, reminding him that this was the duty of knights to protect peace. Yet, little did anyone know that Rahit's Black Edge group had secretly gathered in a hidden location, plotting a far greater plan, a plan to take revenge on Orvelia after 100 years of oppression. They intended to seize the entire kingdom, and the demon investigation mission was merely the first step in their grand scheme. They would pretend to be harmless until the time came to overthrow everything. Many days passed, yet Claus's scouting team still had not returned, causing growing concern among everyone. Meanwhile, in the royal forest, Claus's team initially found no trace of demons, leading them to doubt the accuracy of the report. However, the moment they let their guard down, a massive horde of demons suddenly ambushed them. An intense battle broke out. Flegg was wounded, and soon after, Gran was gravely injured as well. Claus ordered Gran, the only one still able to move, to return to the castle immediately and report their discovery, while he stayed behind to hold off the demons. He sacrificed himself to ensure the vital information could reach the king. In the capital, news that the scouting team had returned with only one survivor sent shockwaves throughout the court. The survivor was Gran, severely injured, who barely managed to report that they had encountered demons in unknown numbers before collapsing. Panic spread across the royal council as they argued whether to send reinforcements. At that moment, Lord Moraham once again proposed using Black Edge. He argued that sending more soldiers would only lead to more meaningless deaths, and in such a dire situation, they could not afford to waste time on racial discrimination. Faced with an imminent threat, the opposition gradually lost ground. When Kaesel heard that only Gran had returned, he was overcome with grief, understanding that it likely meant Claus and Flag were gone. Frey found him drowning in sorrow, and Kaesel decided he had to go to the royal forest to find Claus. Despite being only a trainee knight and knowing how dangerous such a journey would be, he shouted that he never wanted to lose anyone he cared about ever again. Seeing she couldn't stop him, Frey firmly declared that she would go with him, insisting that the skills of a priestess would be useful, and that Claus had asked her to look after him. Nothing could dissuade her, and thus, Kaesel and Frey left Orvelia together, beginning their journey toward the royal forest. They ventured deep into the dark woods and soon arrived at the site where Claus's team had fought. Now only the bodies of the knights remained, including Fleg, lying scattered across the ground. Kaesel's heart nearly stopped when he saw Claus's familiar shield planted in the earth beside another corpse. But when he turned the body over, he realized it wasn't Claus, leaving a faint glimmer of hope. Overcome with desperation, Kaesel blindly ran off alone to search for Claus, ignoring Frey's frantic calls. Moments later, the two were surrounded by a horde of demons. Kaesel charged into battle, but the strength of a trainee knight was nothing compared to the ferocity of the demons. At the most critical moment, a mysterious female demon appeared. She effortlessly knocked Kaesel aside, seemingly toying with him, before remarking cryptically that he resembled someone she once knew. Kaesel and Frey were completely overpowered, but just as death loomed, a group of mercenaries suddenly appeared. It was none other than Black Edge, led by the dark elf Rahit. They swiftly and easily annihilated all the demons, forcing the mysterious female demon to retreat temporarily. After being rescued, Kaesel and Frey introduced themselves and expressed their gratitude. But Rahit coldly replied that they had not intended to save them, they were merely carrying out a demon-slaying mission commissioned by Orvelia. When Kaesel asked about the members of the scouting team, one of the Black Edge members bluntly stated that all of them were dead, something Kaesel refused to accept. The mercenaries soon departed, leaving Kaesel and Frey in shock and despair. Tormented by guilt and helplessness, Kaesel blamed himself for being too weak to protect anyone. Frey stayed by his side, using healing magic to treat his minor wounds. Just then, two strangers appeared, a cheerful girl who introduced herself as Cleo, a mage, and her companion Roy, her bodyguard. Cleo happily announced that they had been sent by someone named Dominix to find Kaesel and Frey. When they heard the name Dominix, Kaesel and Frey realized it was the old wizard who had once visited them at the orphanage. Cleo revealed that Dominix was none other than the Great Sage, and that he wanted them to come to the Tower of Sages, a place only those chosen could enter. With a magic spell, Cleo summoned a great tower floating high in the sky. Kaesel and Frey were astonished by the magnificent sight, and together with Cleo and Roy, they entered the tower, where they met Dominix again. He looked exactly the same as when they last saw him. Dominix revealed his true identity as the Great Sage and explained that he had always been watching over them. He then led them to a chamber, where they found Claus lying on a bed, severely wounded, but fortunately still alive. Dominix explained that Cleo and Roy had discovered demonic activity and rushed to help, but they found Claus as the only survivor. A while later, Claus awoke, greatly surprised to see Kaesel and Frey. They exchanged stories about what had happened, and Claus confirmed that Gran had survived and managed to return to the castle to report. Kaesel then told them about the encounter with a female demon, but Claus insisted that his team had only fought skeletal demons, proving that the female demon was from a different faction. Later, while Claus rested, Cleo and Frey had a private conversation. Cleo shared that she too was an orphan raised by Dominix, and through that, the two quickly bonded and became friends. Afterwards, Frey found Kaesel sitting alone and approached him. He was deep in thought. Kaesel began to recount the tragedy of his life, how his mother had sacrificed herself to protect him from a demon attack long ago. That memory haunted him and drove him to become stronger so that he could protect those he loved. Yet the harsh reality had made him realize how powerless he still was. Meanwhile, in Orvelia, Black Edge had returned and stood before the royal court, bringing with them the severed head of a demon as proof, striking fear into the nobles. Lord El-Moraham seized the opportunity to elevate his status, arguing that to fight against the demons, all races must unite, just as the great King Kyle had done 100 years ago. However, in a private meeting later, Moraham's true nature was revealed. He and Rahit mocked the cowardice of Orvelia's royal council. Moraham confessed his ambition to overthrow the current chancellor and seize power for himself, viewing Black Edge as the perfect tool to carry out his scheme. He promised them wealth and status once the plan succeeded. Back at the Tower of Sages, despite still being injured, Claus expressed his determination to return to Orvelia as soon as possible to continue fighting and avenge his fallen comrades. Seeing the situation grow increasingly complicated, Dominix summoned Kaesel and Frey for an important conversation. He revealed that it was he who had asked Kaesel's mother to keep the secret about his father's identity. Then he disclosed a shocking truth: Kaesel was the son of King Kyle, the hero who had fought the Dark Lord Angmund 100 years ago. Therefore, Kaesel was the only one who could inherit the Holy Sword Ea. Kaesel reacted violently, refusing to believe such an absurd claim, insisting that King Kyle had lived a century ago and his mother had long since passed away. But Dominix calmly reassured him and promised to explain everything. Inside the Tower of Sages, Dominix began recounting the events that had occurred during King Kyle's lifetime. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the mercenary group Black Edge was resting. One member, Tam, brought back food and mentioned that just hearing the name Lord Moraham made the shopkeeper's attitude change completely. Their conversation then shifted toward the past, 100 years ago, when dark elves like them could still live freely in the city. Before a woman named Ilya appeared and changed everything so much so that even the mere mention of her name was enough to make Rahit furious. He had to admit that the truth was Ilya was the underlying cause of the oppression they had endured. Returning to Dominix's narration, he had taken Kaesel and the others back in time 100 years earlier, when King Kyle was still a young prince, an energetic and curious prince who often sneaked out into the towns to learn about the lives of the people. Despite the worries and warnings of his half-sister, Ilya, Kyle believed that a king must understand what his people feel, what they eat, and what makes them happy, for a nation without its people cannot exist. His ideal was to become a king who could protect and bring happiness to everyone. Though Ilya worried for her brother, she was deeply moved by his noble ideals and promised that one day, when he ascended the throne, she would use her knowledge of magical technology to support him. Kyle also shared his dreams and ambitions with Arlette, who would later become Kaesel's mother, a truth that astonished Frey and Cleo, who were secretly listening. But their love story did not last long, as the king and the nobles forced them apart, deeming Arlette an obstacle to the political marriage already arranged for the heir to the throne. Yet the tragedy did not end there when demons began to appear, invading the world and devastating villages and towns. During this time, King Median I, Kyle's father, suddenly passed away, forcing Kyle to shoulder the heavy responsibility of ascending the throne. As soon as he became king, Kyle gathered the Orvelian army and met with Lorraine of the Elves and Eatola of the Orcs to form an alliance against the demons. Thanks to his wisdom and courage, King Kyle earned the trust and support of everyone. However, the demonic forces were vast. In one battle, King Kyle was injured and found Arlette in a shelter, where he was overjoyed to learn that she was carrying his child, a son he would name Kaesel. The unborn child gave King Kyle renewed strength and determination to protect the world. As if responding to his wish, the goddess of light Lua appeared and granted King Kyle the Holy Sword Ea, the only weapon capable of destroying the Dark Lord Angmund, along with a prophecy that when a red ring encircled the moon, the Dark Lord would appear. While King Kyle gathered his forces, Ilya devoted herself to researching magical technology, hoping to aid her brother, a deed that would later be twisted by history as an attempt to forge a false holy sword, an act of blasphemy against the goddess Lua. Dominix explained that on the fateful day 100 years ago, when the night sun aligned with the moon to form the Red Ring, a sorcerer named Malduk used forbidden magic to open a spatial rift, summoning the Dark Lord Angmund. With the Holy Sword Ea in hand, King Kyle and his allies set out to confront Angmund. Meanwhile, Ilya had completed her research and rushed after King Kyle, but she was slain by demons on the way and never saw her brother again. The final battle was unimaginably fierce, and afterward, both King Kyle and Angmund disappeared, leaving only the Holy Sword Ea behind. Following that, demonic activity began to wane, and peace returned. Yet no one knew where King Kyle had gone, and Malduk had escaped. The tragedy continued when Ilia was tried posthumously and convicted of blasphemy against the goddess, leading to the persecution of all dark elves in Orvelia, including her entire family. The injustice and suffering fueled the hatred of people like Rahit, who believed that while the past could not be changed, the blood debt owed by Orvelia must one day be repaid. After hearing the entire story, Kaisel asked about his mother's fate over the past 100 years. Dominix revealed that because they believed only those of King Kyle's bloodline could wield the holy sword, and fearing that Malduk might attempt to summon Angmund again after 100 years, they decided to place Arlette, who was pregnant with Kaisel at the time, into a magical slumber. Nearly a century later, Arlette awoke and gave birth to Kaisel, but soon after, their village was attacked by demons, and she lost her life. It was Dominix himself who took Kaisel to an orphanage and secretly watched over him all this time. Now, as the night sun was about to align with the moon once more, and the increasing demonic activity signaled the return of the Dark Lord, Kaisel, though still doubtful about his own identity, resolved that he wanted power, he wanted the holy sword so he could protect everyone. Thus, he asked Dominix how to obtain it, and Dominix told him that the first step was to break the seal by going to the Illidora forest to meet Lorraine, the great sage of the elves and one of King Kyle's former companions. Since Dominix could not leave the Tower of Sages, he sent Cleo and Roy, who had overheard the entire story, to accompany and support Kaisel and Frey. Cleo was overjoyed, thrilled to finally leave what she considered a boring tower. Kaisel then went to say goodbye to Claus, who, after hearing the entire story, was deeply shocked but supported his friend's decision. He promised to protect Orvelia while they were gone. Finally, with the determination to uncover the truth about himself and gain the power to protect those he loved, Kaisel set out with Frey, Cleo, and Roy, beginning their journey toward Illidora Forest. Before long, they arrived at the forest, where Cleo couldn't hide her disappointment, having expected to visit somewhere more exciting. She also bluntly expressed her skepticism about Kaisel's royal lineage, finding it hard to believe that an ordinary boy like him could be the son of the legendary hero king. However, Frey believed they were being guided by the goddess Lua. As their conversation continued, a horde of demons suddenly appeared. Roy swiftly and skillfully defeated them, but another wave immediately attacked. Just as the situation turned dire, a female elf appeared and effortlessly annihilated all the demons with a single arrow. Kaisel and the others approached to thank her, and the elf introduced herself as Selene, sent by her master, the great sage Lorraine, to guide Kaisel. She told them that her master had been waiting for them, though she coldly clarified that her orders were to guide Kaisel alone. This annoyed Cleo, but they decided to follow nonetheless. Upon entering the forest, the group immediately sensed a hostile atmosphere. The hidden voices of elves whispered all around them, calling humans tainted beings and demanding that they leave at once. Cleo grew angry and wanted to confront them, but Kaisel stopped her, saying that as outsiders, they shouldn't cause trouble, they only needed to reach Master Lorraine quickly. However, as they walked, Selene suddenly vanished, and they soon realized they had wandered into a dead end. It was then that Roy recalled another name for Illidora Forest, the Lost Forest, where elves and treants, the ancient tree people, would often trick and mislead intruders to make them lose their way. Meanwhile, Selene found herself surrounded by treants, who seemed to be protecting her. Selene explained that she understood their mistrust of humans, she herself shared that feeling, but this was the wish of her master, Lorraine. Faced with the treants' firm resistance, Frey gently pleaded with them to let the group pass. At that moment, an adorable young treant suddenly appeared and signaled for them to follow. Everyone was surprised, but they had no choice but to go along. They soon reunited with Selene, who explained that the young treant was named Necha and warned everyone not to harm it. Since night had fallen, the group decided to set up camp and rest for the night. Kaisel startled everyone when he casually ate a mushroom that looked extremely poisonous, only to comment that it tasted delicious. A special friendship then began to blossom between Kaisel and Necha, whom Cleo nicknamed Chibai, as they played together. Kaisel taught Chibai how to hold a branch like a sword, and as Selene watched, she couldn't help but admit that perhaps Necha saw something in Kaisel that she herself could not. She began to wonder if humans were truly as wicked as she had always believed. Meanwhile, Frey, Cleo, and Roy discussed Kaisel and the Holy Sword. They debated the difference between being chosen by destiny, like King Kyle, and gaining power through one's own effort. They also speculated about the true power of the Holy Sword and the return of the Dark Lord Angmund. Cleo pointed out that both the Holy Sword and Angmund had appeared only once in history, while Roy suggested that perhaps the heroes of 100 years ago had managed to stop the Dark Lord before he could fully enter their world, and thus their mission now was to help Kaisel obtain the sword as soon as possible to prepare for the worst. That night, as everyone slept, a loud noise woke them. They discovered that a massive treant had been taken over by a vile demon and was rampaging violently. Selene realized that a nearby demon had defiled and corrupted the treant, turning it into a puppet. Amid the chaos, the demon seized Chibai. Cleo couldn't use her fire magic for fear of harming the little treant, leaving the group helpless. In a desperate moment as Chibai was about to be crushed, Kaisel tried to save him but was caught by thorny vines himself. Just as the monster was about to devour Kaisel, Chibai threw his weapon at the demon, saving Kaisel, but enraged, the creature killed Chibai right before Kaisel's eyes. Witnessing this, Kaisel snapped. He lunged forward and destroyed the demon, but he didn't stop there. Overcome by rage, he continued to stab the lifeless corpse repeatedly, his fury consuming him, despite Frey and Selene screaming for him to stop. At last, he collapsed from exhaustion. Then, the voice of Master Lorraine echoed around them. She had seen everything and posed a question to Selene whether Kaisel, with such wrathful power, truly deserved to inherit the Holy Sword. The great sage Lorraine appeared, thanking Kaisel and his companions on behalf of the forest for cleansing Elidora of the demon's corruption. She then comforted Kaisel, explaining the cycle of life and that Necha would soon be reborn into a new existence. Kaisel expressed his desire to break the seal on the Holy Sword, but Lorraine hesitated. She explained that once the seal was undone, the immense power of the sword would begin to flow into its air, and she was unsure whether Kaisel was truly worthy of such power, which could destroy both body and soul if used improperly. Yet Kaisel, driven by grief and his resolve to protect his loved ones, pleaded earnestly for the power, uncaring of the risk to himself. Lorraine, however, told them to rest for the night, and that they would continue the next day. When they reached the resting place, Frey asked permission to bury Necha in a spot the little treant had loved, and Selene led them to a clearing where they all bid farewell to their small friend and offered their parting words. Later, in a private conversation with Selene, Lorraine asked her opinion of Kaisel, whether he was worthy of the Holy Sword. Selene hesitated, saying she could not answer yet since she had only known him for a short time, and then left. Outside, however, Selene still couldn't stop wondering, was Kaisel truly worthy? At that moment, Selene happened to see Kaisel still blaming himself for his own weakness, for letting anger consume him, for defeating the demon merely by chance, and for wielding a power he could not control, a power he never desired. Then, a miracle occurred. From the place where they had buried Necha, a small sprout began to emerge. It was Necha's rebirth, a sign that life continues and brings hope. This renewed Kaisel's strength and strengthened his resolve to become stronger. The next day, Selene gave Lorraine her answer. Though she had initially hesitated and struggled against her prejudice toward humans, she ultimately admitted that she had seen something different in Kaisel. He was not like the selfish, cruel humans she had known. Though she still worried about the wrath that had overtaken him when he lost Necha, she believed Kaisel had realized that such rage was not the true strength he sought. Therefore, she concluded that Kaisel was worthy of the Holy Sword, and she was certain Necha would have agreed with her. With Selene's support and everyone's faith in him, Kaisel once again stood before Lorraine. Cleo confidently declared that if anything went wrong, her magic would handle Kaisel, and when Lorraine saw their unity, she realized that Kaisel had wonderful friends, just like King Kyle once did companions who stood by his side against the Dark Lord. She also explained to Selene that differences in race were not barriers when they shared the same goal. Then, with everyone's agreement, Lorraine began the ritual. She lifted part of the seal on the Holy Sword, and Kaisel, the true heir, felt a surge of power flow into his body. Although there was no immediate visible change, Lorraine explained that he would soon feel the strength within him. She also revealed that 2 seals still remained, one held by Iatola, leader of the orcs on Mount Ogria, and the other by Pavel in the snowy mountains of Windland. No sooner had the first seal been broken than the demon worm suddenly revived and attacked again. Lorraine explained that some demons could leave behind seeds that allowed them to regenerate. This time, however, Kaisel was completely different. With his newly awakened power, he fought calmly and decisively, ultimately destroying the demon completely, avenging Chibai's death. Before they departed, Lorraine blessed them, saying she believed Kaisel would gain the support of many allies and that their bonds would lead him to success. Selene admitted she now trusted Kaisel and his companions. Together, the group bid farewell to the Illidora forest and their small friend, Chibai. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, Lord Moraham continued his schemes. Exploiting the cowardice of the royal court, he pushed the Black Edge unit to the front lines, aiming both to secure achievements for Rahit and to weaken the Knight's forces, all serving his ambition to seize power. After leaving the forest, Kaisel's group headed toward their next destination, Mount Ogria. They decided to stop by villages and towns along the way to rest and gather information. During their travels, Cleo teased Kaisel, saying that if things were different, he would be a prince. But Kaisel insisted that he just wanted to be himself, an ordinary Kaisel. However, their journey was once again interrupted when the mysterious demon woman from before appeared. This time, she came alone, without any demons, her only intent being to have some fun. A battle broke out, and when Kaisel attacked, she sensed the power of the holy sword emanating from him. In a moment of pride, Cleo blurted out that Kaisel was the son of King Kyle, a revelation that surprised the demon but didn't frighten her. She called the holy sword Lua's curse and asked Kaisel if he wished to become the goddess's puppet, before vanishing, leaving Kaisel bewildered. In the days that followed, Kaisel's group continued their journey toward Mount Ogria, eventually arriving at a bustling town. At the same time, Cleo couldn't hide her excitement and immediately planned a sightseeing and food-tasting tour, arguing that everyone was tired and needed a break. She cleverly persuaded the group that they should spend the whole day in the town and rent a cozy inn instead of continuing to camp outdoors. And so, the group quickly immersed themselves in the lively atmosphere of the town. However, their joy was short-lived when Cleo spent all the money they had, putting them in a difficult situation. They now faced the prospect of sleeping outside once again. Not wanting to do that, Cleo suggested they find a job to earn some money, and the idea was quickly welcomed by everyone. They found a restaurant willing to pay them and offer a spare room to stay in. The group quickly got to work, each taking on a role. Frey served customers, Cleo and Roy helped in the kitchen, while Kaisel remained troubled by the words of the female demon. He couldn't understand why the holy sword, the weapon King Kyle had used to protect everyone, could be called a curse. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Cleo, encouraged by the others' flattery, performed a bit of magic to entertain them. But unfortunately, a spark flew out and caused a small fire. Although the fire was quickly extinguished, Cleo became deeply upset and guilt-ridden. That night, Roy revealed that this wasn't the first time Cleo had caused trouble. She had once blown up an entire building in the Tower of Sages. Roy explained that Cleo was a genius but inexperienced in the outside world, and that Dominix believed she needed to find her own way to properly use her potential. Hearing the story, Frey stayed beside Cleo to comfort her as she struggled with guilt. Cleo said she couldn't remember her mother's face, as her mother had died when she was very young. The only memory she had left was her mother's words, that the greater the power, the greater the sorrow. Frey gently encouraged her, saying that magic was the bond connecting her to her mother, and she would understand the meaning of those words as she continued to grow. The next morning, Frey discovered that Roy had disappeared, leaving behind only a note saying he went to earn money. At the same time, Cleo found a job at a restaurant on the outskirts of town called Madame Wolf's Tavern. The group decided to go there, where they found an old, worn-down restaurant standing in a desolate area scattered with large rocks. Madame Wolf, an elderly and somewhat irritable woman, immediately assigned them a mountain of chores. With her stubborn personality, Cleo got into a heated argument with Madame Wolf, but eventually had no choice but to follow her orders. After a hard day's work, Madame Wolf treated them to a hearty, delicious meal and explained that her restaurant rarely had customers. When Cleo offered to help using fire magic, Madame Wolf immediately stopped her and told them that the land had once been a thriving town but was burned down 30 years ago during the war. Her family had also perished in the flames, and the rocks they saw were actually makeshift graves. She warned Cleo that she knew the terrifying power of fire well, and said that a mage in the past had tried to protect them, but ended up causing an even greater tragedy. Madame Wolf's words made Cleo realize the deeper meaning behind her mother's advice, that even a small mistake could bring catastrophic consequences. Just then, a horde of demons suddenly attacked the restaurant, and the group quickly jumped into battle to protect Madame Wolf. However, Cleo, haunted by the old woman's story, couldn't bring herself to use her fire magic. But Madame Wolf shouted at her, saying that the present mattered more than the past and that she had to live to protect her friends. Those words awakened Cleo. She realized that her magic existed to protect those she loved. With newfound strength, she unleashed a massive fireball that burned the entire horde of demons to ashes. After the battle, Roy unexpectedly reappeared with a large bag of money, making Cleo both relieved and furious. After this painful yet meaningful experience, Cleo seemed to have matured. She finally understood that to protect everyone, she could not afford to face things half-heartedly. In the royal capital of Orvelia, the Black Edge mercenary group, led by Rahit and backed by Lord Moraham, was steadily carrying out their plan for revenge. They had succeeded in building their reputation by continuously exterminating demons, and now they were getting closer to their ultimate goal, taking control of the entire kingdom. Meanwhile, in the royal castle, Princess Scarlet, commander of the Royal Knights, and Chancellor Bale were listening to a troubling prophecy from the astrologer Ophelia. Ophelia warned that the day of Lee, the goddess of darkness, was approaching, and on that day, when the night sun aligned with the moon, the Dark Lord Angmund would return to spread terror across the world. This news heightened their anxiety, as Orvelia no longer had the holy sword Ea. King Kyle was long gone, and the current king was gravely ill. Yet Princess Scarlet declared that the Knights of Orvelia would fight to protect the kingdom. Shortly after, Bale arranged a meeting between Rahit and Princess Scarlet. She expressed her recognition of Black Edge's achievements and made an offer inviting them to join the ranks of the Knights and cooperate in the upcoming campaigns. Although Rahit was scheming in his heart, he quickly accepted the offer. This made the members of Black Edge rejoice, believing it to be a great advancement. However, Rahit immediately crushed their excitement, reminding them that their ultimate goal was not some hollow title, but the overthrow of Orvelia itself, and joining the Knights was a golden opportunity to infiltrate and destroy the enemy from within. At the Knights meeting the next day, Princess Scarlet officially introduced Rahit as a new ally, a decision that immediately drew fierce opposition from Zero, who always despised dark elves and brought up Ilias's crimes. However, Princess Scarlet firmly defended her decision, asserting that Ilias's sins had nothing to do with Black Edge, and that in this dire situation, they needed the help of everyone. With arrogance, Zero deliberately insulted Rahit by calling him a filthy rat and threw a bag of coins at him. But Rahit returned it and calmly warned Zero that instead of worrying about rats, he should focus on dealing with the demons, a sharp reply that left Zero speechless. Later in the meeting, Rahit pointed out flaws in the kingdom's defense system and proposed more effective strategies, further boosting his credibility in Princess Scarlet's eyes. Yet Zero's hostility didn't stop at words. He went to his father and other nobles to convince them to oppose Black Edge. Although unsuccessful, he refused to give up. Not long after, while Tam was out buying supplies, a merchant gifted him bread for free in gratitude for their deeds, but the brief moment of joy was shattered when a group of thugs suddenly attacked him. Despite being feverish and wounded, Tam tried to restrain himself to avoid a major fight. Fortunately, his comrades arrived in time to save him. Upon returning and treating his injuries, Rahit realized that the attackers were not random, they were connected to Zero. With Lord Moraham's help, Rahit investigated and found evidence of Zero's involvement. He confronted Zero alone, standing in front of his carriage with a murderous glare. Facing Rahit's fury, Zero was forced to admit his guilt and was only spared when his terrified father begged for mercy. Rahit warned them never to lay a hand on his comrades again. After this incident, the relationship between Black Edge and the royal court became increasingly complicated. Princess Scarlet personally apologized to Rahit for Zero's actions, an act that especially surprised the Black Edge members, particularly Tam. But Rahit reminded them that they could not trust anyone in Orvelia, for these were the very people responsible for the deaths of their families. The painful memories of the past flooded back the day when Rahit and his younger sister Ripine witnessed the brutality of the Orvelians. Those memories became the flames that fueled his vow of revenge. Meanwhile, in a distant land, Malduk, the one who had summoned Angmund 100 years ago, and the mysterious demon woman named Maria were preparing for the Dark Lord's return. They knew that the day of Lee was approaching, and Maria's urgent mission was to find the holy sword Ea before their plan was set in motion. At the same time, Kaisel's group was traveling through a desolate region, where a small argument broke out between Cleo and Kaisel when Cleo accused him of favoring Frey. However, the tension was quickly diffused by Roy, and they soon arrived at a small village where they met a young girl with a sorrowful expression. The village had become a refuge for survivors from a nearby town that had been attacked by demons. The village chief, Hendel, explained their difficult situation, and Frey immediately began treating the wounded, while Kaisel and the others helped rebuild the houses. Frey took particular notice of the girl they had met, Elise, who neither spoke nor smiled and remained lost in silence. Frey realized that the girl's wounds could not be healed by magic alone. Out of compassion, she asked the group to let them stay in the village for another day, a selfish request perhaps, but one born from kindness. She spent her time playing with the children, teaching them how to make flower crowns and draw pictures, trying to bring a little happiness back to those whose hearts had been scarred by war. At first, Elise remained shy and distant, but gradually she was drawn to Frey's warmth and patience. One day, while drawing, Elise accidentally hurt another child in an attempt to protect her own drawing. Frey quickly treated her and noticed the picture Elise had been so desperate to defend it was of the flowers her mother had loved. Then, the horrific memories came rushing back. Elise began to cry and confessed that her mother had been killed by demons. Her broken words revealed the deep pain hidden in her heart. To help Elise overcome her grief, Frey came up with an idea. Together, they gathered those flowers and used them to bake a special cake. The sweet aroma filled the air, drawing everyone in, and when they tasted it, the villagers were delighted and surprised. Frey gently encouraged Elise to bake another cake herself for everyone, and for the first time in a long while, a bright smile bloomed on Elise's face. Witnessing the miraculous change, the village chief invited Frey to stay, a proposal that made everyone, especially Cleo, uneasy. But they trusted that Frey would never abandon them. On the day of their departure, Elise, terrified of being separated from Frey, tricked her into entering a storage shed and locked the door, begging her to stay forever. When Frey went missing, Kaisel and the others began searching. Kaisel found Elise and, with his gentle nature, persuaded her to reveal where Frey was locked up. Inside the shed, though trapped, Frey did not get angry. She understood that Elise's actions came from loneliness and fear. At that very moment, a giant demon suddenly attacked Kaisel and Elise. Frey, trapped inside, could only watch helplessly as Kaisel fought. Determined to protect them, she used all her strength to break through the wooden wall and unleashed her magic just in time to shield Kaisel from a fatal blow. The battle ended when Kaisel finally defeated the demon. Elise, after being saved, ran to embrace Frey, apologizing tearfully for what she had done. Frey gently forgave her. Before leaving, Frey promised Elise that she would grow into a strong person and bake even more delicious cakes, and that they would meet again one day, a promise that filled the girl's heart with hope and joy. As they continued their journey, Cleo and Roy resumed their ongoing bet over cookies, and this time, Cleo had to admit defeat. Continuing their journey, Kaisel's group arrived at a deserted town, a place that had once been attacked by demons. They immediately felt a strange and unsettling atmosphere, and Roy's suspicions were confirmed when a man who appeared to be a villager suddenly transformed into an undead and attacked them. Roy swiftly struck it down, but soon after, the entire town seemed to come alive, with hordes of undead rushing out from all directions. The group had no choice but to flee, and they were fortunate to find shelter in a house lit by lanterns. The man inside, named Johann, explained that those undead were once the villagers themselves. After being attacked and killed by demons, they had returned as corpses possessed by dark power, endlessly attacking the remaining survivors. Johann was the only one left, having barricaded himself in his home to survive. However, when Frey mentioned Elise, the young girl they had met at the refugee village, Johann was deeply moved and confirmed that Elise was his daughter. Though overjoyed to know she was still alive, Johann stubbornly refused to leave the town to find her, a decision that confused everyone and especially angered Cleo. That night, while everyone rested, Roy explained further about the undead. They were corpses controlled by demonic energy, without souls or memories, and there was no way to save them. The cruel truth broke Frey's heart. Later that night, Kaisel overheard Johann speaking softly in the basement. Curious, he looked down and was horrified to see an undead chained to the wall. It was Lisa, Johann's wife and Elise's mother. Kaisel and Roy confronted Johann after discovering the truth. And in despair, Johann confessed that after the demon attack, Lisa had returned as an undead. Unable to accept her death, he had kept her imprisoned, caring for her as if she might recover one day. Roy bluntly told Johann that Lisa was dead and that no undead could ever be cured. But Johann remained blinded by grief, insisting that she was merely ill and that he couldn't abandon her. Hearing Johann's torment, Kassel remembered his own pain of losing his mother and shouted, trying to wake Johann from his delusion. He told him that Elise, his living daughter, needed him now, and that he still had a chance to protect her, unlike Kassel, who had forever lost his own chance. Kassel's words pierced Johann's heart, and he finally began to realize that clinging to false hope was making him abandon the only family he had left. Johann went down to the basement alone and tried to remind Lisa of their past with the hairpin she had worn on their wedding day, but the undead only responded with mindless fury. At that moment, Johann was forced to accept the truth that the woman before him was no longer the Lisa he loved. Roy offered to end her suffering, but Johann couldn't bear to do it. The noise of their struggle soon drew the attention of all the undead in town, who began surrounding the house. A fierce battle broke out, and the group fought desperately to survive. When Johann saw undead Lisa once more, his heart broke completely. Yet his desire to protect Elise gave him the strength to make his final decision. He personally ended Lisa's life, freeing her soul and releasing himself from the weight of the past. When the battle was over, Kassel used his power to destroy the remaining undead, declaring in the glow of light that he would protect everyone. As dawn rose once again, Elise was finally reunited with her father. Meanwhile, in the capital city of Orvelia, the reputation of the mercenary group Black Edge grew stronger with every demon-slaying victory. The people now hailed them as heroes, a stark contrast to the cold, disdainful looks they once received. Yet behind that praise, members of Black Edge, especially Rahit and his sister Repine, never forgot their deep hatred. To them, all the citizens of Orvelia were enemies, and they secretly wished that every single one of them would perish. In contrast, Tam had his own concerns. He went to a confectionery shop to meet Sheila, the girl who had helped bandage his wounds. At the same time, after completing his mission in the royal forest, Rahit happened to meet Claus, who had come to thank him for saving his two friends, Kassel and Frey. However, Rahit coldly denied any acquaintance with them, acting as if he had never met them before. Meanwhile, in the royal castle, Princess Scarlet was deeply worried about her father's worsening health. Despite his illness, the king remained clear-headed and voiced his suspicions about the loyalty of Black Edge and their possible ties to Lord Moraham. He warned his daughter not to place too much trust in others, a piece of advice that Scarlet obeyed but still found difficult, as the growing threat of demons weighed heavily on her shoulders. Later, in a private conversation with her loyal attendant Demia, Scarlet revealed her resolve. She would take up the sword to protect the kingdom, just as Demia had vowed to become her shield. Soon after, Scarlet met privately with Rahit. She frankly admitted the shortcomings of the royal administration, especially the nobles' obsession with their own interests while neglecting the common people, and she expressed her determination to change that. Perceptive as she was, Scarlet also noted that both she and Rahit wore invisible armor, each concealing their true selves, and she asked him what his true reason for fighting was. Rahit's answer was vague. He said that slaying demons was the only thing he could do, only deepening the mystery surrounding him. Elsewhere in town, Tam met Sheila again. He returned her handkerchief and invited her out for a meal as a gesture of gratitude. From that encounter, a pure and gentle bond began to blossom between two people from entirely different worlds. However, Tam's actions did not escape the notice of the other Black Edge members. Azel questioned him about his relationship with an Orvelian girl, and Tam, flustered, confessed everything. Later, Repine spoke privately with him. She explained that their goal was revenge and that personal happiness could not exist within that mission. She warned Tam that if he ever stood in her brother's way, she would not hesitate to kill him. Though her words were harsh, they carried a deep sorrow, a reflection of the horrific past when her entire family was massacred by Orvelian soldiers. Those memories had become the source of her unyielding resolve to support her brother's vengeance. Later, Tam met Sheila again and decided to tell her the truth about his past, the death of his parents and siblings in a massacre committed by Orvelian soldiers, a tragedy that left him forever haunted by the day of his own birth. He confessed that there was an invisible wall between them that could never be crossed, then left, leaving Sheila in stunned silence. Meanwhile, during an emergency meeting at the royal court, it was decided to send an army to investigate the Galoa Plains, rumored to be the place where the Dark Lord would be resurrected. Rihit volunteered for Black Edge to take the lead, a proposal that was accepted but concealed a far greater conspiracy behind it. Elsewhere, Kaisel's group finally arrived at the Red Valley, home of the Orc tribe, a land said to be stained with the blood of endless battles, where the cries of the dead still echoed through the mountains. They reached Mount Ogria, called the Red Valley because of the legends that its soil had been dyed crimson by countless wars. There, they hoped to meet the Orc chieftain, Ayatollah, who was said to possess one of the sealing keys. But far away, in a dark and desolate place, the sorcerer Malduk, the one who had summoned Angmund 100 years ago, was reveling in chaos alongside the demoness Maria. He eagerly awaited a new feast of slaughter, a dance of death he had prepared for foolish mankind. As he reminisced about his past, he recalled his days as a mage serving the Republic of Grey, when he delved into forbidden magic, until the king's death plunged the nation into peril. He had succeeded in resurrecting the king in the form of an undead, a feat he considered both grand and divine. Yet, instead of being praised, he was met with disgust and contempt from Princess Jane and the Knight Theo, who called him a demon and exiled him from the kingdom. That humiliation planted within him a deep and burning hatred, fueling his desire for destruction and revenge against the entire world. Back with Kaisel's group, as they ventured into the Red Valley, they soon encountered an orc sorcerer named Kala and his apprentice Dale, who were desperately fighting against their own kind orc warriors who had been turned into undead. Without hesitation, Kaisel's group rushed to their aid, and after vanquishing the undead, they were warmly welcomed by Kala, a sorcerer gifted with the power to foresee the future through dreams. He revealed that he had foreseen the coming of a human hero who would bring hope to the world, and he believed that hero was Kaisel. However, their hope was soon dimmed when Kala delivered tragic news. The orc chieftain Ayatollah had died, and his successor, Chieftain Sieg, harbored a deep hatred toward humans. The reason was that a long-haired human sorcerer had once come to the valley, after which many orcs mysteriously disappeared and later returned as undead, attacking their own tribe. Because of this, Sieg had issued a decree forbidding humans from setting foot in their lands. Despite the danger, Kaisel earnestly pleaded for an audience with Sieg, and trusting in his prophetic vision, Kala agreed to guide him on the condition that Kaisel would go alone to avoid causing unrest. While Kaisel went to face the chieftain, Frey, Cleo, and Roy stayed behind to wait. But because of Cleo's mischievous prank drawing graffiti on a sacred fountain, they were captured by other orcs. Meanwhile, Kaisel finally came face to face with Chieftain Sieg, a massive and imposing orc warrior. Sieg doubted Kaisel's claim of being the heir to the Holy Sword and demanded proof. He challenged Kaisel to a duel. Kala tried to intervene, even offering his own life to protect Kaisel, but Kaisel refused and chose to fight. The two clashed fiercely, debating the meaning of sacrifice and leadership. Kaisel declared that he would protect everyone, even if it meant using his own body as a shield, a naive yet pure ideal that caused Sieg to falter for a moment. He admitted that Kaisel possessed something precious, something worth more than life itself, just like the orcs did. Sieg then revealed a message left behind by Ayatollah, that the heir to the Holy Sword must journey to the sacred ground, the resting place of their ancestral spirits, to undergo a trial and retrieve something from within. That would be the ultimate proof of worthiness. But at that very moment, Kaisel's friends were brought in as prisoners, and Sieg delivered an ultimatum. They would be held as hostages. If Kaisel failed the trial at the sacred ground and was deemed unworthy by the ancestral spirits, not only he but also his friends would be executed. Faced with such dire circumstances, Kaisel had no choice but to enter the mysterious sacred ground, a place from which few ever returned to prove himself and save his companions. Guided by the orc sorcerer Kala, Kaisel stepped into the sacred ground, a holy and mysterious realm that only the chosen could enter. As they journeyed deeper inside, Kala explained that this was where orc sorcerers trained to strengthen their minds and souls, and that at the altar in the center, Kaisel would face his trial, a test that would challenge the very core of his heart. Meanwhile, imprisoned as hostages, Frey, Cleo, and Roy remained calm. They observed that the orcs seemed to be a peace-loving people when not provoked, and their conversations soon turned to the trial Kaisel was undertaking. Roy expressed his belief that since Kaisel was the true heir, the outcome was already destined, though he couldn't help but wonder what would happen if someone else entered the trial instead. However, their discussion was abruptly interrupted when Cleo's teasing of the orc guards caused trouble, prompting the guards to transfer all three of them to another location. At that moment, Kaisel had reached the central altar, where the mysterious voices of the ancestral spirits echoed, demanding that he show them his heart whether it was strong or weak, and immediately, Kaisel was pulled into an illusionary world, a world born from his deepest desire. There, he found himself living a peaceful and happy life beside his long-deceased mother. Every morning, he woke to her voice, shared breakfast, and enjoyed tranquil days together. Yet, as those perfect, happy days repeated over and over, a vague sense of unease began creeping into his mind. Kaisel felt something was wrong, something subtle, but deeply significant, and in a moment of clarity, he confronted the painful truth, shouting that his mother was dead. The illusion shattered, and the spirit of his mother, or rather, the embodiment of the test appeared before him, trying to keep him there by promising an eternal life of happiness, a world without demons, without the holy sword, without burdens or pain. But even with his heart breaking, Kaisel firmly refused. He knew his friends were waiting for him, and that countless others were still suffering outside. He couldn't selfishly lose himself in a sweet dream. With a final farewell to his beloved mother, he completely broke the illusion. After overcoming the trial, the spirit of Chieftain Ayatollah appeared and congratulated Kaisel for defeating his own illusion, an illusion meant to test the hearts of mages by showing them the world they most desired. Ayatollah explained that the human heart is fragile and easily tempted by false happiness, and had Kaisel's heart been any weaker, he would have been trapped there forever. At last, the spirit of Ayatollah bestowed upon Kaisel a talisman proof demanded by Chieftain Sieg. Kaisel then emerged from the Holy Land and joyfully reunited with his friends. He presented the talisman to Sieg, and the Orc chieftain kept his promise, performing the ritual to release the second seal of the Holy Sword. Yet even after both seals were removed, Kaisel felt no visible change in power, much to Cleo's disappointment. Sieg explained that the trial was designed to attack the weakest part of one's heart, and he advised Kaisel to remember what had happened to turn that weakness into strength and become a true warrior, like the great King Kyle of old, who had always fought on the front lines. He also revealed that when the time came, he and the Orc tribe would fight alongside the heir of the Holy Sword, just as they once stood with King Kyle 100 years ago. However, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of Malduk, the long-haired sorcerer who had turned the orcs into undead. Having sensed the Holy Sword's power, he had come to claim it. Battle erupted instantly. Malduk was overwhelmingly powerful, striking Sieg down with a single blow. Kaisel and his group charged in, but their strength was no match for him. Amid the chaos, Frey was gravely injured by one of Malduk's attacks. Witnessing this, a furious surge of power exploded from within Kaisel. He launched himself at Malduk in a berserk assault, and even the sorcerer was shocked by the raw force Kaisel unleashed. Though Kaisel managed to drive Malduk back, he could not control the power coursing through him and eventually collapsed, unconscious. After tending to Kaisel's wounds, Frey began writing a letter to Claus while Kaisel remained in a deep sleep following the fierce battle. Her letter was not only a message of concern, but also a recounting of their arduous journey together, a destiny she believed had been preordained for them all, especially for Kaisel, the one fated to bear the burden of becoming the heir to the Holy Sword. Frey's stream of memories began from the moment they left the Tower of Sages, parting ways with Claus to embark on a true adventure. Their first destination was the Elidora Forest, a place both beautiful and perilous, where they sought to meet the great sage Lorraine of the elf tribe. There, they were guided by an elf named Selene, but her distrust toward humans led the group astray into the labyrinthine woods, where spirits and treants loved to play tricks, causing intruders to lose their way. Yet, it was precisely there that a special friendship blossomed between Kaisel and a small, adorable treant named Necha, whom Cleo fondly nicknamed Chibai. Necha's innocence and trust made Selene begin to question her own prejudice against humans. She started to notice something different in Kaisel, a sincerity she had never seen before. However, tragedy struck when a vile demon corrupted a massive treant and attacked them. Amid the chaos, Chibai was slain right before Kaisel's eyes. The pain of losing his tiny friend drove Kaisel into an uncontrollable rage, and he launched a furious assault on the demon. Seeing this, Lorraine, who had been observing everything, began to hesitate, wondering whether Kaisel was truly worthy of the Holy Sword's power, a power capable of destroying both body and soul if used wrongly. But after witnessing Kaisel's remorse and his determination to grow stronger in the right way, along with Necha's rebirth as a new sprout and, most importantly, Seleni's faith in him, realizing that Kaisel did not seek the power of anger, but the strength to protect Lorraine, finally agreed to unseal the first seal of the Holy Sword and revealed the path to their next destination, Ayatollah of the Orcs and Pavel of the distant Windland Mountains. Frey's thoughts then drifted through the roads they had traveled and the people they had met. She remembered Lady Volf, a woman who had lost her entire family in a wartime fire. Her story helped Cleo understand her mother's words, that the greater the power, the deeper the sorrow, and that her magic should be used to protect her friends, not as a tool of reckless pride. Frey also recalled Elise, the orphan girl who had lost her mother in a demon attack, whose soul had been so deeply scarred she could no longer smile. It was through Frey's patience and warmth that Elise rediscovered her laughter, and through that, Frey herself learned how to face the pain of others. The letter then recounted their encounter with Johann in a town overrun by undead, where the group was forced to face a cruel truth that the undead were nothing but lifeless corpses controlled by demons beyond salvation. With his strength and unwavering resolve, Kaisel helped Johann free himself from the tormenting memory of his late wife so he could live on for Elise, his only remaining daughter. Finally, Frey's memories returned to the most recent events at Mount Ogria, where they faced the hostility of the Orc tribe caused by Malduk's actions, yet also found hope in the prophecy of the Shaman Kala. Frey remembered how Kaisel had bravely faced Chieftain Sieg's trial in the Holy Land, where he battled the illusion of a peaceful life beside his deceased mother, and with steadfast resolve, overcame it, earning Sieg's recognition, who then unsealed the second seal. Yet their joy was short-lived when Malduk appeared, and in that fierce battle, when Frey was gravely wounded, Kaisel let his emotions overtake him, unleashing uncontrollable power before collapsing. Though the orcs now praised Kaisel as a true hero, Frey's heart was heavy with sorrow. She wondered if a hero protects everyone, then who will protect the hero? Just as Frey sank deeper into those thoughts, Cleo appeared beside her, cheerful and optimistic as always, lifting Frey's spirits once more. She said that it was precisely because Kaisel carried such a heavy burden that they had to stay by his side to support him, and Cleo's faith in Kaisel, in their friends, and in the future filled Frey with renewed strength. Frey realized that as long as she was with these companions, nothing was impossible. With newfound belief and hope, she ended her letter, promising Claus that she would never give up, and that they would continue their journey together until the day they met again. Little did anyone know that while Kaisel was still fast asleep and his friends were rekindling the flame of hope, in the capital city of Orvelia, preparations for a grand expedition to the Galua Plains were taking place in great haste. At the center of attention stood none other than the mercenary group Black Edge, who had shed their reputation as outcasts to become heroes in the eyes of the people, especially children, who welcomed them warmly. It was a change Rahit cynically remarked would make their wine taste better, yet deep down, he and his comrades never forgot their ultimate goal to secure absolute status so that no one could ever look down on them again. Later, at the royal castle, the Black Edge group had an official audience with Princess Scarlet, the supreme commander of the knights. The meeting began with some chaos as Azul acted disrespectfully and overly casual, but Scarlet handled the situation gracefully, maintaining composure and greeting them with poise. She declared that among the knights, she was not a princess but a commander, and that she would personally join them on this expedition. Afterward, Demia presented the details of the mission. Their target was the ruins of the Grey Republic on the Galua Plains, the very place where the Dark Lord Angmund had appeared 100 years ago. Black Edge would serve as the vanguard. However, the arrogance of the Black Edge members worried Demia and the other knights, as they showed no intention of cooperating, wishing only to claim glory for themselves. To resolve the tension and prove her own capability, Scarlet issued a challenge. She asked Azul to spar with her in front of Claus. The duel commenced. At first, Azul was dismissive and held back, but Scarlet swiftly demonstrated her skill. She effortlessly dodged his attacks and countered with precise, decisive strikes, forcing him onto the defensive. When he finally tried to strike seriously, Scarlet shattered his sword with her own, ending the fight in spectacular fashion. Through this, she proved her strength and earned Black Edge's respect, affirming that this was the quickest way to gain their trust. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Lord Moraham was executing his own scheme. He convened a meeting of other nobles, including the timid and fearful Lord Schmidt, to announce his plan. He proposed that once Black Edge returned triumphant from the expedition, Rehit would be granted the title of honorary noble. The proposal was immediately met with objections, but Morahem skillfully swayed them with promises of wealth and land, along with the prospect of having Black Edge as their loyal protectors. He even revealed his greater ambition to seize power from the Prime Minister while Scarlet was away, allowing this alliance of nobles to control the kingdom as they pleased. At the same time, in the royal castle, Prime Minister Bale was trying to dissuade Princess Scarlet from personally joining the expedition, but she firmly refused. She insisted that they could not sit idly by waiting for something they did not possess, the Holy Sword, and that they must take it upon themselves to defend the kingdom. Later, in a conversation with Claus, who would remain behind to protect the capital, she heard about Kaisel, a trainee knight who had embarked on his own journey to slay demons. The story intrigued Scarlet, and she expressed her wish to meet the young knight someday. Soon after, the grand expedition officially began, with the people cheering as Black Edge departed in glory. And in that crowd, Sheila silently watched Tam, giving him a look full of worry. Meanwhile, Malduk and Maria were also talking after his encounter with Kaisel. Malduk had sensed the power of the Holy Sword, yet he couldn't understand how an ordinary human could possess it, and he began to doubt Maria's honesty. As night fell and the entire army made camp, Rehit gathered his members together, reminding them that their mission was only to investigate, though everyone understood that this was their chance to achieve glory, to return as heroes, and to carry out their plan to seize control of the kingdom. Meanwhile, Princess Scarlet had a brief conversation with Ripine. She felt a sense of kinship between the two of them, but Ripine coldly brushed it off, asserting that someone like Scarlet could never truly understand them. Eventually, they arrived at the Galua Plains, a barren, lifeless wasteland where not even an animal could be found. At first, the atmosphere was strangely calm, boring even, and the members of Black Edge began to joke around. But as they ventured deeper, a mysterious magic circle suddenly appeared beneath Tam's feet before he could react. He was instantly killed. The gruesome death of their comrade threw the entire Black Edge group into despair and rage. They screamed helplessly, convinced that a demon lurking nearby was the one responsible. Soon after, the demon appeared none other than Malduk himself. Princess Scarlet and Demia, who were standing guard, immediately felt an ominous chill. Scarlet couldn't shake off the unease left by her short yet cryptic conversation with Ripine, whose words still echoed in her mind. But that terrifying stillness was shattered when Malduk appeared out of nowhere. As the battle with the Dark Sorcerer was about to begin, Ezel, consumed by pain and fury over Tam's death, charged forward to attack, but Malduk only smiled wickedly. Then, to everyone's horror, Tam, whom they believed to be dead, suddenly stood up, blocked Azel's strike, and killed him. Yet this was no miraculous resurrection. Malduk had turned Tam into an undead puppet, a soulless and merciless weapon under his control. Laughing cruelly, he commanded Tam to attack his own comrades, forcing them to face an unbearable choice. In the end, to free Tam from Malduk's control and protect the others, Ripine was forced to personally end her friend's life once again. The pain upon pain ignited the fury of Black Edge, and a bloody battle erupted between them and Malduk. However, with just a wave of his hand, he wiped out nearly the entire group. They fought desperately, recklessly, driven only by vengeance. Rehit and his sister managed to coordinate just enough to stab him once in the heart, but it only enraged him further. Malduk unleashed his power, blasting the siblings back. At that moment, Maria appeared. She noticed something strangely familiar about the pendant around Rehit's neck. To stop Malduk from killing the two siblings, Maria intervened, and just as the princess's army arrived, they were forced to retreat. Meanwhile, after nearly half a month of unconsciousness, Kaisel finally awoke. Surrounding him were his friends and the kind-hearted orcs who had taken them in. Frey had been constantly by his side, caring for him, her face full of worry, as were everyone else's. Yet the first thing Kaisel thought of upon waking was to continue his journey, for he knew Malduk had escaped, and the return of the Dark Lord was drawing near. Roy and Cleo tried to stop him, explaining that he had lost control of his power and fallen into a berserk state during the battle with Malduk. However, contrary to their concern, Dale praised that power as a miracle from the goddess Lua, a strength capable of obliterating evil and proof that Kaisel was a true hero. This stark difference in perception left Kaisel even more confused. Afterward, in a private conversation with Kala, Kasil expressed his fear. He was afraid that the power he had accidentally unleashed could harm the very people he wanted to protect. Kala listened quietly before giving his advice from the perspective of an orc. He said that the orcs valued both strength and spirit. A weapon could only be used properly when the one wielding it possessed a steady heart. He believed that Kasil had lost control because his heart could not manage the immense power of the holy sword. And to overcome that, Kala advised Kasil to hold firm to his ideals, to use that power not out of hatred, but to protect others. That night, unable to sleep, Kasil and Frey talked under the night sky. Kasil admitted that, although he couldn't remember clearly, he felt that anger and hatred had consumed him, a feeling entirely different from the fury he felt when he lost Chibai. This time, he had completely lost himself. He realized that simply pursuing strength wasn't enough. If he allowed his own heart to defeat him, he would never be able to wield the holy sword properly. It was Frey's sincere encouragement, her faith in his resolve, that helped Kasil regain his confidence. She reminded him that it was his stubbornness and his refusal to ever give up that had allowed him to overcome every hardship up until now. The next day, with his spirit restored, Kasil's group prepared to set out once more. The orcs, who had completely changed their attitude, now saw them off as heroes. Before they departed, Kala secretly revealed to Frey a troubling part of his prophetic dream, that on the path of war, Kasil would disappear. However, he reassured her that a prophetic dream was not an unchangeable fate but a warning, and he believed that Frey, who always stayed by Kasil's side, would be the key to changing that future. Continuing their journey toward the snowy Windland Mountains, Kasil's group passed through a small village, where an unexpected yet fateful encounter occurred. A lively and somewhat eccentric female mercenary named Rihanna suddenly appeared and mistook Frey for a noble lady named Elaine whom she had been searching for. Rihanna's excessive enthusiasm caused some confusion, especially when she began assuming that Roy was the one who had deceived Frey and even complimented his handsome looks. However, the misunderstanding was quickly cleared up, and Rihanna introduced herself as a mercenary hired to find the missing people from the village. She then offered to guide Kasil's group while giving them an important warning. They must not reveal that they were from Orvelia. Upon arriving in the village, they witnessed firsthand the deep hostility the villagers, especially the dark elves, held toward Orvelia. They called the kingdom a tyrant and a murderer, leaving Frey and the others feeling uneasy. Rihanna explained that for the past month, many villagers, regardless of race or age, had mysteriously disappeared, which only intensified the growing tension within the village. Although Roy believed they shouldn't get involved so as not to delay their journey, Frey's kindness and Cleo's stubbornness prevailed, and the group decided to stay and help. Yet tragedy struck again when Layden, a young dark elf boy close to Rihanna, also went missing. Unable to stand by any longer, the group, together with Rihanna and the villagers, split up to search in the nearby forest. During the search, Kasil and Rihanna accidentally fell into a deep pit. In the darkness underground, they had a heartfelt conversation. When Rihanna learned that Kasil was the heir to the Holy Sword, she was utterly astonished. Upon hearing Kasil confess his fear of losing control over his power, she offered a sincere yet unique piece of advice. She shared her own past, that she had once been the daughter of a noble family, bound by expectations and a political marriage arranged for her future. But she realized that the future held many paths, and she chose to live freely. She advised Kasil to live for himself, not to let the weight of responsibility crush his heart until it withered away. She even teasingly suggested that he should give up the holy sword, marry Frey, and live an ordinary life. Rihanna's words, blunt yet light-hearted, touched something deep within Kasil. However, as they talked, they found Layden's shoe, and when they ventured deeper into the cave, they discovered a horrifying scene. All the missing villagers, including Layden, were imprisoned within giant spider silk cocoons. A monstrous spider demon appeared, and it had also captured Cleo. A fierce battle erupted. The demon was immensely strong and savage. During the fight, as Kasil was attacked, his fear of losing control over his power once again surged up, paralyzing him with hesitation. He feared that his strength might harm his companions. But at that life-or-death moment, when he saw Cleo about to be devoured and Rihanna in danger, Kasil overcame his fear. He realized he could no longer run away, he had to fight. With newfound determination, he unleashed all his strength to destroy the demon and rescued everyone. After the battle, the missing villagers were safely returned to their families amid overwhelming joy. Rihanna thanked Kaisel and admitted that his way of life had its own worth. As they prepared to depart, she couldn't resist teasing Kaisel one last time, leaving behind a light-hearted, unforgettable memory in their journey. Though brief, that encounter taught Kaisel many things: that there is more than one way to live, and that facing one's fears is the first step toward becoming stronger. After the bloody battle at Galua Plains, the Orvelia Knights fortunately found refuge in Elise's village, a brief moment of peace amidst the storm. Princess Scarlet and Demia were welcomed by the village mayor, and they expressed their gratitude for giving them shelter and allowing Rahit to be treated. The mayor replied that they were happy to help, partly because a young knight from Orvelia named Kaisel had once saved their village. This revelation surprised Scarlet. She realized he was the very friend Claus had mentioned, and she was glad to know there were other allies out there fighting against the demons. Meanwhile, in the capital, news of the Black Edge Group's annihilation spread like wildfire, sowing panic and fear among the populace. People began to doubt the kingdom's strength, and a dark, oppressive atmosphere enveloped the city. Back in the village, despite being cared for with great effort, Rahit remained in a deep coma, which deeply worried Scarlet and the other knights. They knew only he held crucial information about the type of demon they had faced. Though Scarlet was eager to return to Orvelia to prepare for war, she decided to stay until Rahit awoke, as she could no longer allow anyone to die in vain. During her days in the village, Scarlet found a small measure of peace playing with the children. She had a conversation with Johann, who spoke of the hardships they had endured and the incredible resilience of the children. His words strengthened Scarlet's resolve, reaffirming her determination to protect everyone. Finally, after many days, Rahit regained consciousness, but what awaited him was not relief, but a brutal truth. Scarlet had to tell him that he was the only survivor. All his comrades, his friends, his brothers had perished. The overwhelming shock shattered him completely. In anguish and despair, he ran outside, demanding to know why he alone had survived. Scarlet found him as he was drowning in grief, and she tried to comfort him, but Rahit's pain and hatred erupted violently. He revealed the entire truth: that Black Edge was a group formed by people whose families had been massacred by Orvelia, and that their purpose in coming here was not to cooperate, but to take revenge, to overthrow the kingdom that had brought them so much suffering. This revelation stunned Scarlet. She realized how blind she had been. She thought she understood her knights and her people, but in truth, she had known nothing of the pain they carried. Shame and guilt consumed her. She felt she had failed as a commander. However, instead of drowning in sorrow, Scarlet found comfort in Elise, the little girl who brought her a flower cake. Through that simple gesture, Scarlet realized that kindness and resilience still existed, even in the darkest times. Meanwhile, in a desolate forest, Rahit had run off in despair, seeking death, but was saved by a mysterious woman, Maria, the demoness who had appeared several times before Kaisel's group. She healed Rahit's wounds and then revealed a shocking truth. The pendant he wore belonged to Ilia, a woman accused of blasphemy against the goddess Lua 100 years ago. Maria claimed to have been Ilia's close friend and explained that history had been distorted. Ilia had not created the fake holy sword to oppose the goddess, but to save her younger brother, King Kyle. Maria then showed Rahit a new path, a way to fulfill his vengeance by going to the Tower of Wisdom, where Ilia's research lab and the fake holy sword still remained. Fueled by a new sense of purpose and vengeance, Rahit decided to follow the path Maria had laid before him. Meanwhile, Kaisel's group, now filled with excitement, headed toward the snowy peaks of Windland Mountain, where they hoped to meet Pavel, the legendary hero who held the final key to unsealing the holy sword. Cleo was especially thrilled to meet such a great sorcerer, and everyone eagerly anticipated the moment the holy sword would be fully awakened. However, while crossing a remote area on their journey, an undead suddenly appeared. Though it was swiftly defeated, its presence caused Roy to behave unusually. That night, when it was Roy's turn to stand guard, Kaisel approached him to talk, and for the first time, Roy decided to share his past. He had once been an orphan wandering the streets until one day, he was saved by a man named Zaid, the leader of a mercenary group called Flugel. But unlike ordinary mercenaries who fought only for money, Flugel was different. They helped those in need without expecting any reward. Zaid took Roy in and treated him like family, and Roy gradually came to see Flugel as his true home. He deeply admired Zaid's ideals, the belief that dreams and hope were the wings that could carry one to the future, symbolized by the embroidered wings on their sleeves. Zaid even taught reading and writing to underprivileged children, believing that knowledge could change their lives. However, their peaceful days ended when Flugel accepted a dangerous mission from Orvelia to investigate the Galoa Plains, a place from which no one had returned alive for 100 years. Yet, driven by his ideal of building a safe passage through that deadly land, Zaid accepted. But tragedy struck. They encountered demons, and one by one, the members of Flugel, including Zaid himself, were turned into undead. Roy was the only one who managed to survive, rescued by a mage who brought him to the Tower of Wisdom. There, he met Dominix, and under his guidance, Roy began studying the undead, hoping to find a way to save his friends. But the cruel truth left him disheartened. The undead could not be saved. It was Dominix himself who had asked Roy to accompany Kaisel, under the condition that Roy would aid him on his journey. When Roy finished telling his story, both he and Kaisel realized that the undead they had encountered earlier was Pavian, one of the members of Flugel. Roy knew that his other comrades, including Captain Zaid, might also be wandering nearby. The next day, Kaisel told Cleo and Frey about Roy's past, and Cleo suggested that they should stay and help Roy put an end to the suffering of his fallen comrades. By using magic to create a loud noise, they successfully lured out the undead Zaid. A fierce battle broke out, and this time it was Roy's turn to face the unbearable pain of fighting against the very man he respected the most, his mentor and savior. However, the memories of Zaid's ideals, the belief in moving forward no matter the hardship, gave Roy the strength he needed. In the end, he freed Zaid's soul with his own hands. After it was over, Roy expressed his gratitude to his friends. Once they buried the fallen, the group continued their journey. After many days of travel, they drew closer to the majestic yet unforgiving Windland Snow Mountain, home of Pavel, the reclusive sorcerer who held the final key to unsealing the Holy Sword. Time was running short, as the night sun was soon to eclipse the moon, signaling the Dark Lord's return. However, as they began their ascent, they quickly realized that this trial would not be easy. A violent snowstorm struck without warning, making it nearly impossible to advance. Though exhausted, Cleo still tried to joke around to keep everyone's spirits up, while Frey secretly used her magic to shield the group from the raging storm so they could keep moving forward. When the storm finally subsided, they discovered a small wooden cabin and decided to rest there. But at that moment, Frey collapsed from exhaustion. Cleo immediately realized that Frey had overused her magic to the point of depletion. She explained to Kaisel and Roy that it was only thanks to Frey's sacrifice that they had survived the blizzard. This filled Kaisel with deep guilt. He realized that while he had been obsessed with becoming stronger, he had neglected the care and well-being of his companions. He had selfishly assumed that as long as he was fine, everyone else would be too, a mistake that had driven Frey to push herself beyond her limits. Meanwhile, in Elise's village, Princess Scarlet and her knights were preparing to return. She had decided to head to the Tower of Wisdom to seek Dominix's help. Upon learning of her intentions, Rihit also resolved to go there to search for Ilia's fake holy sword. Thus, two people with completely different goals, yet sharing the same destination, began their respective journeys. Back at the mountain cabin, as Kaisel was lost in regret, he had a quiet conversation with Frey. He told her about the recurring nightmares he'd been having, dreams in which a mysterious voice called his name. He believed it was a message from the Holy Sword, but he could not understand its meaning. Frey comforted him, reminding him of their childhood memories, and in her gentle, warm way, helped him let go of his worries. The next morning, filled with guilt and concern for Frey, Kaisel left a note behind and decided to continue alone, not wanting to endanger his friends any further. However, Roy soon discovered his absence and stopped him. He told Kaisel bluntly that his actions were not born of protection, but arrogance, that if Kaisel died, Frey would be the one to suffer most. He reminded Kaisel that they were not just companions, but true friends who had shared too much to simply abandon one another. At that moment, Cleo and Frey arrived, and together they confronted Kaisel. Frey firmly declared that she wanted all four of them to finish this journey together. That unity and genuine friendship made Kaisel change his mind. He realized he was not alone, he could not fight by himself, and he needed his friends by his side. With deeper understanding and stronger bonds, the group continued their journey. They soon discovered an ice cave, where they believed Pavel resided. However, the moment they entered, a wall of ice suddenly rose and separated Kaisel from the others. and a mysterious voice echoed through the cavern, perhaps the next trial they had to face. Without explanation, Pavel launched a fierce assault on Kassel. Though Kassel fought with all his might, he could not match the overwhelming power of one of the greatest heroes in history. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ice wall, Frey, Cleo, and Roy could do nothing but watch helplessly. Yet when they realized the wall could be broken, they joined forces. Cleo used her fire magic to melt the ice, and Roy followed up with his speed to shatter it. Just as Kassel was about to be defeated, Cleo broke through the ice wall in time, and everyone rushed to aid him. Suddenly, Pavel stopped his attack and declared that they had passed the trial. The old mage explained that he had never intended to test Kassel's strength, but rather that of his companions, for he believed the successor of the Holy Sword could only unleash his true power with strong allies by his side, just as King Kyle once had. Their unity had proven they were worthy. After the trial ended, Pavel began to recount the tale of 100 years past. He revealed that he was the one who had protected Kassel's mother, Arlette, while she slept in the cave all this time. He recalled his first encounter with King Kyle, a passionate young man, yet deeply steadfast, who repeatedly sought him out to join the fight against the demons. Initially, Pavel wanted nothing more than a peaceful life, away from worldly conflicts, and refused. But King Kyle's ideal to protect everyone gradually moved him, and eventually, Pavel joined his cause, becoming one of the young king's closest companions. Pavel then shared King Kyle's final words before his last battle, that if anything were to happen to him, Pavel should watch over Arlette and their unborn child. After King Kyle vanished with the Dark Lord, Pavel and the remaining companions decided to seal the Holy Sword, Ea, within the World Tree to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Yet the tragedy did not end there. Dominix proposed a cruel but necessary plan to place Arlette and her unborn child into a magical sleep lasting 100 years, in the hope that the child would inherit the Holy Sword's power and one day defeat the Dark Lord upon his return. Arlette accepted the plan, asking only that when she awoke, she would see all her friends again, and that they would help guide her child. After hearing the full story, Kassel finally understood the sacrifices of his parents. He realized that his journey was not merely a burden, but a continuation of their will. Pavel admitted that he had long wondered whether their choice had been right, but upon seeing Kassel's resolve and his loyal companions, he found his answer. Then he warned that time was running out that very night. When the night sun met the moon, the Dark Lord would return. They had to reach the World Tree quickly to perform the final unsealing before it was too late, for only the power of the Holy Sword could defeat Angmund. And so, under Pavel's guidance, they set off at once. The group began their journey toward the World Tree, a sacred place protected by the power of the goddess Lua, and one of the pillars that supported the world itself. They were racing against time, holding on to faith and hope that they could prevent the coming catastrophe. Yet deep within Frey's heart, Kala's ominous prophecy that Kassel would disappear kept echoing, planting in her an unshakable unease she could not voice. On that fateful night when the night sun aligned with the moon, the sky turned crimson red. Upon the desolate Galua plains, Malduk began his ritual. A massive spatial rift tore open, and from within stepped a familiar figure, King Kyle, the legendary hero who had vanished 100 years ago. However, joy and astonishment quickly turned into sheer terror when Malduk bowed his head to welcome King Kyle as the Dark Lord Angmund. It seemed that during his century of imprisonment in another dimension, King Kyle had been corrupted by dark power. Now he had returned, not as a savior, but as a destroyer. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Princess Scarlet and Rahit had finally reached the Tower of the Sage. They were greeted by Dominix, the great sage, who confirmed his grim premonition that the Dark Lord had indeed returned. Scarlet earnestly begged Dominix to tell her how to defeat Angmund. At the same time, Rahit, holding Ilia's pendant in his hand, demanded to know the truth. Dominix led Rahit to Ilia's old research chamber, where he found her journal. Through its pages, a truth buried for a century was finally revealed. Ilia had never intended to create a false holy sword to defy the goddess Lua. Her true purpose had been to craft a magical set of armor to protect her younger brother, Kyle, from Angmund's dark power. She had foreseen the Dark Lord's return through a mysterious figure, and had devoted herself to her research, working tirelessly day and night. The journal also revealed that after King Kyle's disappearance, the ensuing power struggle led to Ilia's false accusation and condemnation. Political conspirators had exploited the incident to eradicate her family, sparking a brutal purge against the Dark Elves. The truth shattered Rahit completely. He realized that his hatred had been misplaced, that the woman he had despised all his life, Ilya, was in fact his ancestor, a tragic woman who had sacrificed everything for her loved ones. Overwhelmed by pain and regret, he collapsed in despair. Yet when he saw the armor Ilya had left behind identical to the pendant he wore, his heart wavered. Elsewhere, Dominic's revealed to Scarlet the entire truth about Kaisel, that he was the son of King Kyle and the sole heir to the Holy Sword, and that he was now heading to the World Tree to perform the final unsealing. After hearing everything, Scarlet invited Rahit to join her in finding Kaisel. She believed that although there had been misunderstandings between them in the past, they now shared a common goal to protect the world, and she needed his strength. As for Rahit, though still tormented by guilt, hearing Kaisel's name brought back memories of their brief encounters. A decision was made: he would go with Scarlet, not for Orvelia, but to find his own path. Meanwhile, with Pavel's help, the group was transported to a location closer to their destination. They continued their journey with greater urgency than ever. Pavel warned Kaisel that the Holy Sword's power would attract demons' attention, and that he must not use it until they reached the World Tree. However, Frey's intuition whispered something troubling to her, and she could not shake the image of Kaisel's disappearance from Kala's prophetic dream. Not long after, Kaisel's group arrived at the Eladora forest. As soon as Pavel teleported them to the forest's edge, the group split up to search for food and water, while Cleo stayed behind to talk with Pavel. At the same time, Kaisel and Frey were sitting by the stream, confiding in each other. Kaisel admitted that even though he had never met his father, he could gradually feel a connection forming between them. He was beginning to understand the burdens and fears King Kyle had once borne, and that only made him admire and respect his father even more, strengthening his determination. However, just as they returned, a horde of demons suddenly attacked. A fierce, unexpected clash erupted. Although Pavel had warned Kaisel not to use the Holy Sword's power to avoid detection, in the chaos, Kaisel instinctively unleashed part of its strength to protect Frey, a fatal mistake that immediately drew the attention of Malduk, who had been secretly watching them all along. Malduk then appeared with a demon king at his side. After a brief exchange of words, both sides engaged in battle. This time, after their long journey, the four young warriors were no longer weak. They fought in perfect coordination, pressing Malduk into a corner. Even he struggled to keep up. But then, the Demon King unleashed a devastating strike, and in a final act of sacrifice to protect the others, Pavel took the full force of the blow. A massive explosion erupted, sending all five of them plunging into a deep abyss. Fortunately, Maria quickly used her power to shield everyone and ensure their safety before vanishing. At that exact moment, Lorraine appeared. She had sensed the danger and arrived just in time to help. Using her magic, she created an escape route and teleported everyone to safety, deep within the Eladora forest. There, they reunited with Selene, who had been fighting alongside the forest spirits to repel the demons appearing across the land. To save the dying Pavel, Lorraine did not hesitate to use the drop of light, the most precious life energy of the entire forest, while praying for a miracle. As they waited in confusion and fear, Maria appeared once more, repeating her cryptic warning that the Holy Sword was the curse of Lua. This time, Lorraine confirmed Maria's identity. She had once been a saint, one of King Kyle's dearest companions, but had since fallen and become a demon. Lorraine begged Maria to turn back, to abandon her dark path, but Maria only smiled bitterly. She said the truth was cruel beyond imagination, that King Kyle could not be saved, and that if they were truly prepared to face utter despair, to feel the same hatred toward the goddess Lua that she once did, then she would tell them everything, the truth buried for 100 years. In the stillness of the forest, with only the sound of raindrops falling, Maria began to tell her tragic tale, a story of love, sacrifice, and betrayal by the very goddess she had devoted her life to serving. Her memories drifted back to the bright days of her youth, when she and King Kyle were childhood friends. She spoke of a passionate young prince who often snuck out of the palace to learn about the lives of his people, believing that a true king must understand both their suffering and their joy. It was in a small bakery in town that King Kyle had his fateful encounter with Arlette Kaisel's mother, a brave, intelligent girl with a kind heart. Their love blossomed naturally and purely, yet that happiness was short-lived. Their relationship faced fierce opposition from the king and nobles, who believed Arlette would hinder the arranged political marriage planned for the future heir. Eventually, Arlette was forced to disappear from King Kyle's life, leaving him with an unhealed wound in his heart. Soon after, tragedy struck again when demons began to invade and ravage the world. Having ascended the throne, King Kyle bore the heavy responsibility of protecting the kingdom. During one inspection tour, he unexpectedly reunited with Arlette in a refugee camp, and his joy overflowed when he learned she was carrying his child, a son he would name Kaisel. The unborn child became the source of King Kyle's strength and unwavering resolve to protect the world. And as if answering his prayer, the goddess of light, Lua, appeared before him and bestowed upon him the holy sword Ea, along with a prophecy foretelling the return of the Dark Lord. Yet Maria's story did not end there. She went on to recount the final battle on the Galoa Plains, a battle far different from what history recorded. She spoke of the moment when King Kyle, holding the holy sword in his hand, stepped alone into the dark barrier to confront Angmund, and of the heroic sacrifice of Ilia, his sister, who had tried to bring him the enchanted armor she had crafted to protect him, but never reached him again. Then came the most horrifying moment. Maria had witnessed with her own eyes the man she loved more than her own life, King Kyle, fail to destroy Angmund. Instead, he was consumed by the dark power itself, his soul and body overtaken, turning him into the new vessel of the Dark Lord. Right after that, the holy sword Ea lost its light, and King Kyle was swallowed into a spatial rift, vanishing forever, leaving Maria in utter shock and despair. She fell to her knees and prayed desperately, begging the goddess Lua, the deity she had devoted her entire life to return King Kyle to her. But her pleas were met with nothing but terrifying silence, no answer, no hope, no divine mercy. And it was in that moment of complete hopelessness, when she felt betrayed by her very faith, that the goddess of darkness, Li, appeared and offered her a new path, a new hope, though one that demanded the price of her own soul. Maria's tale ended with the rain falling softly through the forest, leaving behind a heavy silence and a deep sense of dread in everyone's hearts. They now had to face the cruel truth that Kaisel must confront and fight his own father. Yet, amid the despair, it was Kaisel who stood up. Though his heart was breaking, he declared he would not give up. He would reclaim the holy sword and save his father from Angmund's control. That unshakable resolve, supported by his companions, rekindled a faint light of hope. At that very moment, good news arrived. Pavel had regained consciousness. Though still gravely weak, he used the last of his strength to perform the ritual to complete the final unsealing of the holy sword Ea. Now that the holy sword was fully restored, and with Selene joining their ranks, the group set out once more toward the World Tree, not only to face the Dark Lord, but also to rescue the soul of King Kyle. Meanwhile, Princess Scarlet sat down to write a letter to her loyal minister, Chancellor Bale. In it, she reflected on the chain of tragic events that had unfolded, from the merciless annihilation of the Black Edge mercenaries on the Galoa Plains, to the unbearable anguish of Rahit as he discovered that his life, and the lives of his comrades, had been built upon a misplaced hatred, that Ilia, the woman they had despised for so long, was in truth their ancestor, a pitiful woman who had sacrificed everything for her loved ones. This cruel revelation, together with Rahit's bitter confession about the oppression and suffering the Dark Elves had endured at the hands of Orvelia, forced Scarlet to confront her own kingdom. She realized she had been blind to the injustice and pain festering within the very nation she had sworn to protect. Shame and remorse overwhelmed her, compelling her to make a change. Scarlet's letter revealed her crucial decision to set aside her personal grudges and join Rahit in traveling to the Tower of Sages to seek Dominic's aid. It was there that she learned an even more shocking truth. The holy sword Ea still existed, sealed within the World Tree, and most importantly, its sole heir was Kaisel, a trainee knight once mentioned by Claus, the one who bore the bloodline of King Kyle. Therefore, with a renewed hope and a new purpose, Scarlet decided to head to the World Tree to aid Kaisel, believing that this was the only path that could defeat the Dark Lord and bring true peace to Orvelia. Meanwhile, elsewhere, after a long night, as the group rested in preparation for their final journey to the World Tree, Cleo, Frey, and Selene shared a quiet conversation. They reminisced about their past adventures, strengthening their bond and trust in one another. Frey and Cleo recounted the trials they had faced, from navigating the labyrinth forest to battling the undead in Mount Ogria, and their encounter with Riane. Though those tales were filled with hardship, they only highlighted how much Kaisel had grown. Selene admitted that Kaisel had become far more reliable than when they first met and expressed her belief that the power of friendship and the unwavering support of his companions had forged in him a stronger heart, a heart worthy of inheriting the Holy Sword. Yet amid the cheerful stories, a sense of unease still lingered in Frey's heart. The haunting vision of Kaisel's disappearance from Kala the prophet's dream continued to torment her. Though Selene tried to reassure her that hesitation in battle was the only real danger, Frey could not shake off her anxiety. She silently vowed to do everything in her power to protect Kaisel, no matter the cost. At the same time, Claus and Demia, having received the latest reports, quickly set out as well. They understood that this was no longer a battle for a few, it was a battle for all humanity. Along the way, Claus explained to Demia his reasons for keeping Kaisel's lineage a secret, that he had wanted to respect Kaisel's wish to discover the truth for himself and choose his own path. Demia, in turn, shared her own conviction to become the princess's shield and protect her until her last breath. Though brief, their conversations deepened their mutual resolve and unity. Meanwhile, back at the camp, as Kaisel's group rested before their final journey to the World Tree, Kaisel and Frey shared a heartfelt conversation. Though Frey still carried the heavy burden of Kala's prophecy, hearing Kaisel reaffirm that it was the strength of friendship that helped him grow and gain a stronger heart rekindled her confidence. She silently promised herself once more that she would do whatever it took to protect Kaisel and change the cruel fate foretold by prophecy. At that same time, at the sacred and majestic World Tree, Rahit and Scarlet had arrived first. Burning with rage toward Malduk, Rahit did not hesitate to draw the holy sword Ea from its seal, believing its power could help him exact his vengeance. But the moment he pulled the sword free, a surge of dark energy erupted from nowhere, and at that instant, Malduk appeared. Mocking Rahit's foolishness, he revealed that it had all been a trap, declaring that the holy sword was not a weapon just anyone could wield. Battle erupted immediately. Though Scarlet rushed to aid him, both were quickly overwhelmed by Malduk's dark sorcery. Yet, fueled by the fire of vengeance and empowered by the newly drawn sword, Rahit engaged Malduk in a fierce, evenly matched duel. He fought not for glory but to avenge his fallen comrades. Finally, with one decisive strike, and with the princess's timely support, Rahit unleashed a powerful attack fueled by all his fury, decapitating Malduk and ending the life of the wicked sorcerer. However, their victory was short-lived, for the true enemy soon revealed himself. The Dark Lord Angmund appeared to reclaim the holy sword. He effortlessly defeated both Rahit and Scarlet, and just as he was about to deliver the final blow, salvation arrived once again. Claus and Demia appeared just in time to intercept Angmund's attack. And soon after, Kaisel's group also arrived. A fateful confrontation, a battle that could no longer be avoided between father and son, was about to begin at the sacred World Tree, the place that would decide the fate of the entire world. The battle began with Kaisel facing King Kyle, who was now completely consumed by the dark power, unable to recognize his own son. Wielding the holy sword Ea, he attacked mercilessly. Kaisel fought back while crying out his father's name, desperately reminding him of memories of his mother. But all he received in return was emptiness and increasingly violent strikes. In that desperate moment, everyone rushed in without hesitation to fight together, coordinating their attacks to create an opening to seize the holy sword. They believed that if Kaisel could reclaim it, they might be able to turn the tide. However, when Kaisel finally succeeded in taking back the holy sword, King Kyle did not weaken. On the contrary, he became even stronger. It seemed the holy sword had been suppressing a portion of Angmund's dark power, and once it was removed, that power was completely unleashed. Angmund, now fully freed and overflowing with terrifying dark energy, effortlessly overpowered everyone. He conjured a storm of darkness that struck each one of them down. Claus was thrown far away. Demia and Scarlet could not withstand his attacks, and Rahit was quickly overwhelmed. Even Cleo and Selene could do nothing before such overwhelming strength. When all had fallen, only Kaisel remained, still standing and fighting desperately against his father. Explosions erupted each time their blows clashed. At that moment, Maria appeared to assist, and as the Dark Lord was restrained, Kaisel thrust his sword straight into him. But instead of being destroyed, the same phenomenon that had once overtaken King Kyle occurred again. Darkness began consuming Kaisel's body. Frey tried to save him but was knocked unconscious by the force. Facing the same fate as his father, about to be devoured by the darkness, Kaisel reached the brink of despair. Yet, at that very moment, The voices of his companions Claus, Cleo, Roy, and Selene echoed in his mind, reminding him that he was not alone, that they would always be with him. That belief, that friendship, rekindled Kaisel's inner strength. He realized that he was not fighting out of hatred, but to protect those he loved, to protect a brighter future. At that moment, Ilia's final relic activated, enveloping Kaisel in radiant armor of light. Gathering all the power of the holy sword, all the faith of his friends, and all the love he had for his father, Kaisel unleashed one final strike. The light of the holy sword and the darkness of Angmund collided, creating a cataclysmic explosion that pierced through the layers of darkness and reached King Kyle's soul. In that fleeting instant, King Kyle regained his consciousness. He recognized his son and smiled. With one final act of noble sacrifice, he used the last of his strength to seal Angmund away, choosing to perish alongside his enemy to protect the world and his son's future. In his final moments, King Kyle explained that he had willingly given up the Holy Sword's power to keep it out of Angmund's hands, and that the goddess Lua, answering his wish, had chosen Kaisel as the next successor. It was not betrayal, it was sacrifice. With a final word of love to his son and a heartfelt apology to Maria, King Kyle faded into nothingness, leaving behind boundless sorrow, but also a glimmer of hope for a new future. After the battle, the world slowly returned to peace. The demons weakened, and a new era began. Scarlet returned to Orvelia, bringing not only news of victory but also the truth about Ilia. Through that, the relationship between humans and dark elves began to heal. Having found peace within himself, Rahit decided to travel across the land, mending the wounds of the past. As for Kaisel, after being knighted, he set out on a new journey with Frey, Cleo, and Roy, not a journey of battle, but one of discovery, to protect the smiles of others, and to live a life worthy of his father's sacrifice. And with that, the anime comes to an end. Goodbye.